Today is Juneteenth, a day commemorating when black Americans in Texas learned they were freed. And many activists invoke this day for civil rights causes, from immigration to education, anti-poverty programs, to larger ideas like reparations for slavery, which has long been considered radical by both political parties in America. For example, Barack Obama consistently argued against reparations for slavery in preference for broader reforms.
When it comes to reparations, would you take it a step further in terms of apologizing for slavery or offering reparations to various groups?
You know, I have said in the past, and I'll repeat again, that the best reparations we can provide are good schools in the inner city and jobs for people who are unemployed.
But something's clearly shifting. Today, the United States Congress held its first hearing on reparations in 12 years. And to be clear, many black leaders have been pushing this, like the longest-serving black congressman, John Conyers, who proposed a reparations bill every session for 30 years. He was back in that room today. So was influential author Ta-Nehisi Coates, who laid out the case for reparations in a 2014 essay. And here, 5 years later, he went from banging on the door to serving as a star witness and rebutting Mitch McConnell's argument today that reparations aren't necessary for something that he argues doesn't relate to anyone who's currently alive.
Black people were subjected to a relentless campaign of terror, a campaign that extended well into the lifetime of Majority Leader McConnell. We grant that Mr. McConnell was not alive for Appomattox, but he was alive for the electrocution of George Stinney. He was alive for the redlining of Chicago and the looting of black homeowners of some $4 billion. Victims of that plunder are very much alive today. I am sure they'd love a word with the Majority Leader.
Powerful. And in another development that departs from most House hearings, the first witness of the day was a sitting senator, a co-sponsor of this Reparations Commission's bill, who spoke forcefully about the stakes.
It is a cancer on the soul of our country and hurts the whole body politic. I am brokenhearted and angry right now. Decades of living in a community where you see how deeply unfair this nation is still to so many people. This idea that it's just about writing a check from one American to another falls far short of the importance of this conversation and what I believe we will truly talk about.
Joining me now is that senator and presidential candidate, Cory Booker. Thank you for being here. You sounded quite strong in what you had to say there in your testimony. Why are you doing this, and why now?
Look, I've lived and worked most of my life in low-income communities, black and brown communities, and have been dealing with historical headwinds of segregation, of redlining, of health disparities, of public policies being stemmed from Washington, like the GI Bill and Social Security that were designed to exclude African Americans, from the terrorism that reigned in our country for generations, all the way back to slavery. This is a conversation that we have not fully had in the United States of America, and how the roots of savage inequalities are still being made manifest today because of a lot of that structural inequities baked into our system. And dealing with this issue and finding real practical solutions to address those inequities and disparities baked into from our history is something that we must do, and now is the moment.
You're leading on this bill. Senator Bernie Sanders opposed reparations the last time he ran. He now supports this bill, but also said he's not sure that writing a check is the answer. My question to you is, one, do you two have the same vision on this right now? And two, should the Democratic nominee, should the Democratic platform in 2020 be for slavery reparations?
Well, first of all, I mean, that's what's become. A lot of people don't like the word because it evokes this imagination that people have, and it's being whipped up by opponents that thinks somehow this is going to be about one person writing a check to another person. And that's not what this is about. It's about how can we continue as a nation to have the kind of deep systemic inequalities that we have that stem from income to health disparities to our criminal justice system. This is about actually leveling the playing field. It's not about paying somebody off. And to reduce this to some idea that we're going to write some check and then be done with this issue is so wrong.
Your bill basically would put a small amount of money in to create a commission to study this. If you are running for president, if you have these ideas, is that enough? Or is it time to put the money directly into the program? Why still study it at this point?
Well, it's a de minimis amount of resources to study it and have, which will be historically the first conversation, literally the first commission we've ever created to see how do you address these issues. We have commissions in Washington, and you know this, Ari, to study all kind of stuff, which I think a lot of it's less urgent than what we're talking about right now. And there are practical things. Look, at the end of the day, you talked about putting resources into things. My baby bonds legislation, actually, about having every child born in America as a birthright, having an interest-bearing account there for them, and then money placed in it every single year, depending upon the wealth of your family, would give the lowest-income American kids upwards of $50,000 by the time they're 18 to do things that create wealth.
Your baby bonds proposal is not based on a slavery reparations model, though, right? That's for potentially everyone. As you know, President Obama said that idea, like what you just mentioned, is exactly what should be done, but not something that is somehow specifically tied to race or slavery. Walk us through why essentially you break with Obama there.
Ari, two things. One thing is we're bringing this commission together to study exactly what it would mean. I think for you or I to prejudge what some of the best minds in America would talk to at the end of this process is folly. Let's see what practical things people come up with. Maybe it will look like things like my baby bonds legislation. But right now, I don't have time to wait. So I am putting forward legislation like this that actually is very conscious of race and the racial impact it will have. As Columbia University said, it would virtually eliminate the racial wealth gap. And yeah, it's designed so that every low-income child would have it. But you know, Ari, that African Americans are disproportionately low income. So again, people want to try to cast this in some divisive way, erode the understanding that we have common cause in this, and that there is an urgency in America, because when an African American kid born in a segregated community, de facto segregated community, doesn't have wealth, is below the poverty line, that actually affects the well-being of all Americans, because 9 out of 100 poor kids in America will go on to college, will have a chance to nurture their genius. We're all bereft of the possibility and the potential of that child. This is hurting all of America. The criminal justice system, which you and I both know, is deeply racially disparate in its impact. As Villanova University says, literally, if we had incarceration rates that were the same as our industrial peers, we'd have 20% less poverty in America. And so when I do things like the crack cocaine, powder cocaine disparity, something I pushed for in the legislation that I led and we passed on criminal justice reform, 96% of the people that are being liberated from prison because of that disparity are Black and Latino. So I'm very conscious on a lot of these bills that we're pushing about the impact it will have on communities of color and communities like the one in which I live. And we need to start having a much more nuanced conversation about this than just saying, oh, this is about one person writing a check to another person and wiping our hands of that collective responsibility that we have to make our nation more just and fair.
Right, and the writing a check reference is to how Senator Sanders had recently described it. It's striking to hear you lay it out like that, Senator, as you mentioned, particularly some of those disturbing statistics, and to watch a U.S. government hearing today discuss reparations with you and these other witnesses. I mean, that itself, as you say, is somewhat groundbreaking. I want to get you, while I have you, as a candidate on some other big issues. As you know, the Senate is in this fight over 9/11 funding. I wanted to give you a chance to respond to what Senator Mitch McConnell just said in response to Jon Stewart.
We have never failed to address this issue, and we will address it again. I don't know why he's all been out of shape, but we will take care of the 9/11 Victims Compensation Fund. Members have a lot of things going on at the same time, and it sounds to me like he's looking for some way to take offense. There's no way we won't address this problem appropriately. We have in the past, and we will again.
Your view?
That if you were one of those families that is struggling right now, where you had a family member who did something heroic, as one of those guys that lives just miles away from 9/11, that knows folks that were in those buildings, that knows some of the heroes that stormed into those buildings and were there to protect America, to defend this country, to save lives, there must be a sense of urgency to say to this nation that when you are a hero, we have your back. And so to act in a blasé fashion that this should be just normal functionings of Washington and not see that this is making a statement to all of Americans about what happens in times of national crisis. When we are attacked and when those people stand up, we should make a clarion statement right now that we got your back. Mitch McConnell should step up and show the same level of commitment to our heroes that they deserve. And what's happening now is just shameful, shameful. The way that we're slow walking this or not dealing with it. When we know we put that on the floor of the Senate, it would get probably 100 votes, if not something close to that. And those families would have the resources and the security they deserve, they earned in an act of national, in a time of national disaster.
Very, very well put, and such a big issue, one we've all been watching, kind of one of those times where a lot of people are wondering what's taking so long. We had a first responder on the show this week who said, well, Mitch McConnell is making it take a long time. That was his view. I also want to ask you, before I let you go, about the Trump Justice Department intervening in Paul Manafort's prison assignment to Rikers Island before awaiting trial in New York. Have you ever seen a Justice Department in either administration intervene at this way, at this high level, and does it concern you?
I mean, look, this justice system, Brian Stevenson says it right. We have a criminal justice system that treats you better if you're rich and guilty than if you're poor and innocent. And this is just, to me, yet another example of the unfairness in the system, that I have kids from communities like mine that have criminal convictions for doing things that 2 of the last 3 presidents admitted to doing, who can't find jobs, can't get loans from the bank, can't get business licenses. And here's somebody who has patently been involved in what I believe is treasonous behavior, and is having a president go out of his way to try to give him an easier path, as opposed to him being like others in the criminal justice system. It's exhausting, it is frustrating, and obviously it makes me angry.
Yeah. Well, I was curious what you would think about all that, given your work on it. Senator Cory Booker, I mentioned with some admiration that you seem to be busy at both of your jobs, legislating today in the U.S. Senate, and obviously keeping busy in your other job as a presidential contender, and we'll be watching you on the debate stage. So thanks for making some time for us on the beat, sir.
No, Ari, always love being on with you, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk to your viewers.
Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.